The last few jumps were positioned today for the biggest amateur show jumping event in Australia. It's a sport that's a gruelling test for both horse and rider, and although it's similar to eventing, there are some major differences.
The eventing is a three-phase discipline combining dressage and cross-country, which is natural obstacles through water, etc., and over logs in the countryside, whereas show jumping is more of a purist sport.
Sydney's Mitchell Wood and local Jeremy Inglis are among the 300 riders competing at Parkview Stud near Wyong over the 2 days. The amateurs will ride tomorrow, with men and women of all ages vying to become Australian amateur champions. On Sunday, the professionals will show their skills, with Australia's best riders tackling the tough course.
All those on top of the Australian leaderboard at the time, Vicky Roycroft will be here, and some other Olympians such as George Sanner and Colleen Brook.
If the professional competition proves to be a success, it could become an Olympic qualifying event next year. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The 46 crews harnessed the 15-knot east-nor'easter in Heat 3 of the Cherub Titles. The 2 member teams have come from all over Australia to compete in the Open, Ladies, Junior and Cadet divisions. It's been the locals who've shown their mastery of Lake Macquarie, with Belmont's John Boyd and Jeff Beaushop on Genetic Misfortune leading after the first 2 rounds. But they didn't have it all their own way today, with fellow club members Bart Smith and Greg Stavano sailing Rocky and Bullwinkle to victory. But Genetic Misfortune's second confirms it as the Cherub to beat. The 4th heat of the 7-round competition is run tomorrow. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
For those still in Bass Strait, it was another uncomfortable night, while for those off the Tasmanian east coast, it was a much calmer journey. With New Year's celebrations underway on Hobart's Constitution Dock, Polaris and Fanny Adams had not reported in on their last radio sked, and late this afternoon were not expected to arrive until tonight. Locally, 97 with Central Coast involvement finished second on handicap behind Raptor. New Horizon and Collix Onyx also placed well in their respective divisions. Meantime, the World Moth Championships got underway on Lake Macquarie this afternoon. Hosted by the South Lake Macquarie Amateur Sailing Club, 94 starters from 5 different countries took to the water, with a 20-knot northeasterly providing perfect conditions. The opening heat was also the second last of the Australian Championship, with defending title holder Sydney's Emmett Lazage almost assured a victory, as he'd won all but one heat throughout the week. Lazage was the provisional winner of today's first heat, with Australians Tim Webster second and Mark Thorpe third. The first international was Kiwi Wayne Cook in 7th, while defending world champ England's Toby Collier was 10th.
Beneath these hills could be the answer to the energy problems of our future. The rocks under this land southwest of Muswellbrook are hotter than anywhere else in the country. That's been the case for millions of years. The only difference now is that geologists have found a way to convert this heat into electricity. It's called the hot rocks theory. Water is pumped 3 to 4 kilometres below the Earth's surface onto a hotbed of granite. The water is transformed into steam by the 300-degree heat. That rises to the Earth's surface, where it's harnessed to power a turbine that will produce electricity.
It will complement existing coal technologies, gas technologies. It'll complement future advanced coal technology options as well.
Although only in its infancy, the theory has the backing of 20 of the country's biggest industry leaders, including BHP and Pacific Power. They see it as an environmentally friendly alternative to coal and will invest $20 million on early trials. If successful, hot rocks power stations could be dotted across the valley by the year 2000.
A project of this nature would probably take about 6 years. It's a case of building on initial studies and ensuring that further work is undertaken in the light of the best available information.
Testing will begin in a few weeks to gauge the suitability of the area. The geologists will try and find long bands of low-density rocks, which are ideal for this clean green technology. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. It's 200 hectares of the best thoroughbred country in Australia, home to 400 of the best mares in the country and 7 of Australia's leading stallions. But the Arrowfield Group is about to turn its back on the land that's helped it produce a Golden Slipper and Oaks winner. The group has bought the Wahroonga Stud and Ferry Dawn Farm further north near Scone. Improvements will be made to these smaller lots before the changeover date in mid-1996. Arrowfield Stud will lose its name, with the owner, the Coolmore Group, headed by Robert Sangster, to run the property. Meanwhile, another of Australia's biggest studs, Sedgenhoe, near Scone, is about to become a private company. Sedgenhoe has applied to be removed from the stock exchange after financial problems, which include the loss of 5 prized yearlings to botulism last year. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Cole Wilson runs about 1,200 beehives for honey production and breeding. In 1995, he'll be keeping only a handful of them at his Kurri Kurri base. Bees need the nectar and pollen from native eucalypts to make honey, but most of the trees just aren't flowering this season because of the drought.
This year, because the way it is, you can't keep as many hives in one location, so you've got to reduce the numbers, and also we've been forced to feed the bees as well to keep them going.
The beekeepers are just trying to keep their hives viable. They say there's little chance of producing much honey this year, with output expected to fall to around 40%. That'll have an impact on consumers, with honey prices already on their way up.
A lot of the honey produced in Australia is sold onto the export market. Australia will have trouble meeting the demand of its export customers, and this in turn will be reflected by increased price in the supermarkets.
The beekeepers haven't won any drought assistance, even though they're feeling the pinch from having to buy in food for their hives or from the cost of shipping them around the state.
So that's the same as other primary industries. Like fodder, they're getting assistance, but the beekeeping industry isn't getting any assistance with the feeding of the bees.
The taste of honey is likely to be expensive for a while. Even with the New Year rain, there won't be any improvement in the natural nectar and pollen supply for bees before next spring. Ian Cameron, NBN News. Gail Powell was training up-and-coming show-jumping stars at her Morisset riding school today, but she's ready for some serious training of her own now. She's been selected for a 4-member Australian show-jumping squad to prepare for next year's Olympics in Atlanta and for the 2000 Games in Sydney.
Yeah, extremely big challenge, but it's something I've been striving for all my life. I've had a lot of highs and lows. This would have to be the biggest high.
The funding deal is a breakthrough for Powell, who despite her national championship credentials hasn't been able to afford to compete overseas in the past. Now she's ready to prove herself at the highest level.
The commitment's there. I've got a horse, one of the best horses I've had in a long time. He's only a young horse, which he's got on his side. By the time Sydney comes around, with 6 years' experience, hopefully he'll be up there with the medals.
The Olympic training program starts soon. Right now, though, Gail Powell is focusing on qualifying for Australia in the Show Jumping World Cup, being held in Europe in April. Peter and Erica Birch were still in shock this morning as they sifted through the remains of their YE home, which was reduced to ashes last night. The family had been returning from Sydney when the alarm was raised by neighbours around 9:30 p.m.
Well, when the brigade first arrived, the fire was very intense. The whole building was totally involved in fire. The remoteness of the premises and the distance we had to travel didn't help, but the building was totally involved.
The fire quickly swept through the 8-bedroom house, sparing nothing. New furniture bought just before Christmas for $17,000 was among the contents destroyed, the family estimating the total damage bill at around $600,000. The devastation couldn't be more complete for the Birch family. Their only consolation is that with 4 children under the age of 8, if they'd been at home at the time of the fire, it could have resulted in injury or even death. The family suspects the fire may have been deliberately lit, coming after a series of local break-ins in recent months. Police and fire brigade officers are continuing their investigations. Meanwhile, a 5-year-old boy has been transferred to Sydney for specialist treatment after being badly burnt in a caravan fire in the backyard of a house at Budgewoi overnight. He and his 3-year-old brother were asleep in the van when a candle fell over, setting it alight. They were rescued by their mother, but not before the older boy suffered burns to 40% of his body. He's now listed in a critical condition at Camperdown Children's Hospital. Ian Cameron, NBN News.
There are caravans as far as the eye can see, holidays converging on Port Stephens for their annual dose of rest and relaxation. But for some caravan owners with long-term van sites, it's become more of a hassle than a holiday. Several hundred owners gathered at Fingal Bay to protest the attempt by Port Stephens Council to introduce contracts for caravan park users. Council says it gives rights for the first time to caravan owners with permanent holiday sites at its 3 parks. But this morning's vocal crowd didn't agree.
Caravanners or holiday makers have very little rights at all, and this is what Council's always saying to you. And they've waved the letter at the people here saying that you have nothing. Like, we can throw you out whenever we like.
The contract includes a minimum 30 days notice and compulsory public liability insurance. Council says it's intended to guarantee secure tenure, although there is no compulsion to sign by the January 31 cut-off date.
Well, they say you don't have to sign it, but this is an offer of tenure, and if you don't sign it, you don't have any tenure.
A delegation of caravan park users will meet with the council in the next week to discuss the contracts, but it won't be representing all of the permanent site holders.
What we're going to be more concerned about is coming up here, having a holiday, enjoying our bloody self, instead of being agitated by people like this that want to come onto our area and stir things up.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
After negotiating the start and the straight for the first time, Manwarra Blur and driver Glenn Tomlin crashed to the track. Neither horse nor driver was injured. Tomlin, who worked the 6-year-old this morning, said the horse simply tripped over. The spills continued at the Newcastle Motordrome in the speed car event last night. 16 laps from home, Mark Brown, challenging for 4th, lost control. Then, with just 6 laps remaining, Stephen Graham and Keith Giles clipped wheels, sending both drivers into a series of rolls. Both drivers escaped injury, Brett Morris taking the checkered flag. Meantime, Ron Pine took out the Super Sedan Challenge Cup from Stu Robinson, while in an entertaining demolition derby, Graham McNamara and his HT Holden outlasted Ian Nicholson. It's been a mixed championship for Russell, who won yesterday's opening race, but then failed to finish in the second due to gear failures. He bounced back in the best possible fashion today, winning the third race in the 10 to 15 knot breeze. Western Australia's Gary Gornell finished second, with Troy Forrest from Queensland third. Tomorrow is a lay day in the championship. Also on Lake Macquarie today, the Diamond class, which started its national championship. 2 heats were contested. The first a clean sweep for the locals, with Dave Nichols beating clubmates Noel Jenkins and Jim Books. Nichols also won the second race, Books second and Jenkins third. Meantime, it was day 2 of the VS National Skiff Series on Newcastle Harbour. The Port Hunter Club's Michael Northam holding on to the overall honours from Sydney's John Winning. Winning, the defending champion, was 5th overall yesterday, but won 2 races today, while the consistent Northam finished second in heats 4, 5 and 6.
The Newcastle Regatta last year was a record breaker, drawing more than 80,000 people to the picturesque foreshore area. Organisers predict this month's event will go even further, promising an extravaganza on and around the water. The regatta will include the second round of the Australian Formula One Powerboat Championships, a ski racing classic, boat and food expos, and a laser and fireworks spectacular.
In national terms, it's one of the largest annual maritime events in Australia. Probably lines up next to the Sydney to Hobart because it's on every year, and the harbour here provides a natural amphitheatre for a feast of activities, both on the water and on the foreshore.
The Navy is again taking part, providing the HMAS Newcastle as the flagship for the regatta. The ship's company will also be granted freedom of entry to the city in a colourful ceremony during the two-day event. A feature of the regatta this year will be the inaugural Newcastle Harbour Swimathon. The 700-metre challenge recreates a bit of local history, when the young men of Stockton were forced to swim the harbour after missing the last ferry home.
Hopefully we'll attract probably 200 to 300 swimmers. It's a special event that's been sanctioned by the Surf Lifesaving Association. So we're going to attract the elite of the surf swimmers, and the prize, I hope, is big enough to bring in the top pool swimmers as well.
The regatta is set down for the 28th and 29th of January. While people are being urged to take public transport, additional parking facilities will be opened to help cater for the expected flood of visitors to the city.
The beef industry is still counting the cost of the chemical scare, which saw the United States, followed by Korea, Japan, Taiwan and Canada, impound almost 70,000 tonnes of Australian beef said to be contaminated with the pesticide Helix. The cotton industry reacted quickly and has agreed not to use the chemical.
They are being responsible in an area of grave concern to the cattle industry, and it's really a shame that the rest of the various organisations and departments weren't acting with the same responsibility.
Mr Murray has blamed lack of coordination between the Federal Department of Primary Industries and the New South Wales Department of Agriculture for the scare. He says information should have been made available about the risks of feeding cotton trash to cattle, and he says it's the authorities' responsibility to further investigate how the residue is passed on to stock. The former Deputy Premier also attacked the state government's boast that it's shouldering the financial burden of testing.
And you're looking at $125 a sampling. Now, this is not peanuts for the industry, and to have people saying, oh, we're doing a great job, we're paying for the cost of testing, is absolute rubbish.
A public meeting will be held in Narrabri on the 24th of this month to update producers on the situation. Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News.
Summertime, and on the beach at least, the living is carefree. But not far offshore, a life and death struggle is once again being played out as an increasing number of sharks stray into the safety nets that cordon off our most popular beaches. Meshing contractors report a significant jump in catches, small white pointers and hammerheads among the sharks venturing unusually close to shore.
These type of sharks are normally offshore where no one sees them, but because of possible temperature changes, they are in fact in closer to shore, where obviously more people are going to see them, and obviously a few are going to become caught in the meshing program.
Increasing pressures on fish stocks from professional and recreational fishermen may also be a factor, the sharks moving out of their deep sea haunts in search of food. But that doesn't mean beachgoers should think they're now on the menu. Authorities say people shouldn't be scared out of the water, but should remain alert.
The lifeguards at most patrolled beaches are certainly geared for beach evacuations if sharks are seen inside the system, and people should just remain alert to that, swim between the flags and enjoy their swimming.
The shark meshing program continues to divide opinion. Some defend it as a vital line of defence. Others regard it as merely a psychological safety net for swimmers, one that causes more environmental damage than good. Ian Cameron, NBN News.
In the Sydney to Hobart this year, there were 3 all-women crews, and it seems their tenacity is infectious. Therese Drummond, Melissa Lowe and Felicity McCullum are all from the Hornsby-Ku-ring-gai Police Citizens Youth Club, and on Hawkeye Security are mixing it with the men on Newcastle Harbour.
It's good to see younger people coming up and learning to sail, especially girls, because it's rather male-dominated That's really good to get girls in there and get them confident.
So we're just out here to prove a point that, you know, just because we're girls we can still go as well as the guys and try our hardest and see what we can do.
It's their second season sailing together in what has been a male-dominated class, but despite the odd glance, they've all been well accepted.
It's different because they all just look at us as if we're weird and all that, but they help us a lot.
Heat 8 was cancelled today due to shipping movements in the harbour, but defending champion John Winning from Sydney was victorious in Heat 7, ahead of Newcastle's Michael Northam and Sydney's Warren Cartwright.
It was during a routine check of Maitland Jail's air conditioning system yesterday that workmen found tools wrapped in cellophane paper under the prison officers' canteen at the front of the complex. They were under lights today at Maitland's Police Scientific Unit, being photographed and fingerprinted. Police say the tools are new. They include a grinder, grinding discs, 4 butane gas cylinders and a small burner. To make the package compact, the cord on the grinder has been cut. It could easily have been repaired once inside the jail. While the grinder could be used on any metal, police are unsure what the gas cylinders were to be used for.
They don't generate all that much heat to cut, so we don't really know what the purpose of those were at this stage.
Corrective Services believes that in finding the parcel, they've foiled an escape attempt in its early stages. It's doubtful, though, if it could have progressed further. According to Police and Corrective Services, it would have been difficult, if not almost impossible, for an inmate to remove the implements from the air conditioning duct and take it inside the jail.
Getting into the jail was another matter on its own. It's a rather huge package.
If the implements were to be used for an escape, it's the second plan thwarted by prison officers in recent times. In June, 2 inmates were charged after an air conditioning vent and skylight inside the prison were tampered with. The pair was noticed missing and found inside the jail saddlery shop.
It's retirement time for Clyde, the foundation member of the Hunters Police Dog Squad. But the 8-year-old German Shepherd is showing no signs of slowing down, treating today's media photo call as business as usual. After 7 faithful years of service, Clyde is ready to call it a day. The rigours of police life are considered too much for an ageing dog, but he is bowing out with a law enforcement record that's the envy of the force.
He's found millions of dollars worth of cannabis and drugs generally, missing people, offenders. He's had a pretty successful career.
With Clyde concentrating on kicking up his paws, the police dog squad is faced with the difficult task of finding a replacement.
We're looking for a donor dog, a dog between 12 and 18 months old, German Shepherd, preferably a male, pedigree, with a good temperament, so we can start training.
Clyde won't be breaking all his ties with the police. In retirement, he'll be staying with his long-time handler, Tim Brown, living a dog's life at last in Tim's backyard. Ian Cameron, NBN News.
It's usually what comes out of the Pasminco plant that attracts attention, but today all eyes were focused on what was going in. Touring the smelter were Commissioner William Simpson, environment representatives and residents. Pasminco was trying to convince the inquiry its planned extensions can safely sustain an increase in annual zinc production from 90,000 to 110,000 tonnes. But Lake Macquarie Council, in its submission on the second day of the inquiry, said many questions remain unanswered. It wants a buffer zone that could force people out of their homes.
Council is seeking an arrangement where Pasminco would be required to purchase the homes and compensate the owners and have the homes removed so that it becomes a green space.
But Pasminco says there will be strong local opposition to any attempt to remove residents from the area. Lake Macquarie Council also wants the lead and air levels to be a third less than the national standard and has called for independent pollution tests. Whether or not the Pasminco upgrade is given the go-ahead, pollution will still be a problem for Bullaroo. Lake Macquarie Council is trying to get a long-term solution, asking the state government for $6 million to free the local soil of lead.
It includes things like removal of topsoil and the cleaning up of dwellings and the like.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The crew of HMAS Newcastle was granted the freedom of the city at an official ceremony on the harbour foreshore. It's an ancient tradition from the era when military units on the march, looking for shelter and food, were granted the freedom to enter in return for not plundering the city. Out on the harbour, vessels of all types were also on parade. On dry land, thousands of people packed the rides and displays, creating a carnival atmosphere. But soon after midday, the rain hit, sending the crowd scattering. The powerboat still trialled for tomorrow's big race, the swell making it a thrilling ride. But some water skiing events were postponed, as were helicopter displays. Those events have been rescheduled for tomorrow. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Edgeworth in the white has been a scoring machine all summer. It only took a few minutes to find the back of the net again. It was the start of a dismal night for Lake Macquarie at Austral Park, the 8 goals displayed by Edgeworth having premiership written all over it. After 11 rounds, Edgeworth and Adamstown share the competition lead. Highfields Azuri 2 points away in third.